A rose, no matter how beautiful, still has to contend with thorns. This is your look at the new NECA Toys Godzilla vs. Biollante. Emerging from a fiery pit in Mount Mahara, Godzilla returns to wreak havoc once more. Drawn to Ashinoka Lake, the creature faces off against a hybrid monster created from the cells of a human, a rose, and even Godzilla. Will Godzilla's strength and power be enough to defeat the might and ferocity of Biollante, or has Godzilla met his match? Before we get a closer look at a brand new Godzilla from NECA, the first thing we're going to do is calculate how tall Godzilla is from the movie Godzilla vs. Biollante. As a side note, Biollante is actually one of my all-time favorite kaiju monsters that Godzilla fights in all the films. Just love the design of it. Maybe one day, hopeful thinking of course, down the road we may get ourselves Biollante in either form. Either way, though, nonetheless, though, according to my trusty tape measure, you're looking at the figure of Godzilla from the film Godzilla vs. Biollante, standing 7 inches exactly. And switching that then to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure standing almost 18 centimeters, 17.9 to be exact. Big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that provided this sample of Godzilla vs. Biollante for some size comparisons, as we've just recently looked at a couple of Godzillas, haven't we? We can move over the one from vs. Biollante, and we can bring in the Godzilla from Tokyo SOS. Notably, this is where Godzillas do change in their designs. The one on the left is a little leaner and meaner, a lot bigger as well, and has a little more of a lizard face, whereas the one from Godzilla vs. Biollante has a little bit more cat-like features, something we'll talk about in a second. Mind you, before we do that, let's have a look at the one accessory that comes included with the King of the Monsters, and that in this case is a big energy fire that's coming out from his mouth. Granted, right now, it's not doing much of anything, it's just a plastic sculpted piece. There's some noted areas of blue that's been added there as well. It looks different, certainly from the ones that we've gotten before. Normally, the ones we've gotten before tend to be more translucent in design, where this, in this case, seems to be more just a solid white piece of plastic, with a whole lot of brushing of blue that's been added to just have those sculpted details stand out. Of course, you probably can guess whereabouts this is going to go. It's not going to go into his stomach. If you grab the Godzilla and open up his mouth, say, ah, I don't know if you can actually see it inside. Let me just go ahead and move his arm out of the way. There's a little hole. Well, it's quite actually a large noticeable hole just on the back of his mouth. Because it's dark and it's because it's so black in there, you barely see it until you go looking for it. You're simply just going to take the fire breath and you're going to slide it into his mouth. Now, when you are sliding in his mouth, you want to make sure you're sliding it in the right way. There we go. When it attaches in place, of course, you get that standard look of Godzilla firing off his fiery breath. And that's a nice touch. Certainly a great way to display the figure. I don't tend to always display my Godzillas with all of these additional accessories that NECA Toys does throw with them. Sometimes I do display them, and other times I just decide to leave them out. Well, it does look good, and certainly adds the oomph factor of looking at these pieces on display. I find it sometimes takes away from the sculpting of the face, because if you have that already in there, you then lose sight of things. All the details that NECA put into things like his tongue, his teeth, are all nicely sculpted and very carefully painted. So again, like, it tends to be just a case of a case-per-case basis. Sometimes I display my Godzillas with these, sometimes I don't. I think in a case like the Godzilla here from Godzilla vs. Biollante, I probably will be inclined to display it sans le fire. That's without the fire. Because I do definitely want to have him displayed with his mouth possibly closed or possibly open. Talking about what I mentioned before about Godzilla at times coming across reading a little more like a lizard, and other times coming across a little bit more feral or feline, this is actually a great comparison we can make. bringing in, again, the Godzilla that came from the Tokyo SOS movie. You can see how the Godzilla here on the left, is a little bit more lizard-like. Your traditional Godzilla, but then every once in a while, you'll get a Godzilla that looks like this, which sort of looks a little bear-like, sort of looks a little cat-like. I think a lot of it really stems from the nose area here that gives me the vibes that he's looking a little bit more feline than normal. The detailing and the paint on this one is really quite nice if you like this design of Godzilla. Some people don't. I prefer this design of Godzilla. It just adds a little bit of extra differences between him and, say, some of the other ones we've seen before. I like the job that they've done also on the paint and the eyes. There's a little bit of reflection, most likely because they put a semi-gloss over top of the eyeballs, so they actually reflect the light rather nicely. There's not much in the way of coloring on this particular chap. Can I call you a chap? Okay, maybe not. He is mostly just all dark gray. There are, yes, some areas where he's a little bit on the lighter side of that gray, but is pretty much still staying in that same spectrum of gray. Interesting on this particular Godzilla is he's a little bit more padded, to say the least. His chest is a lot more fuller and a little more stuffier, for example, than some of the other Godzillas that we've looked at before. Well, again, case in point, this is probably the most extreme of comparisons, but again, we'll just bring in the Godzilla from Tokyo SOS, as it's most recently the one that we looked at. You can just see how much they differ from one another. Granted, the one from Tokyo SOS had the noted crest, that little collar piece that he had around his shoulder areas. The Godzilla from the Godzilla versus this particular release of Godzilla, this one doesn't, like I said, have that. It has a little bit more of that swollen puffiness. Kind of makes him look like he's a little bit more like a stuffed animal. I feel when it comes to the design of Godzilla versus Biollante, it kind of goes back to the basic look of Godzilla. Very chunky in the legs, and like I said, very puffy and swollen in the chest. I would say that this one looks a little bit more like somebody's inside wearing the costume, although the lighting and the way that they always record and film these Godzilla films are always top-notch. So even though it does look at times like there's somebody inside the suit, being the fact that they have smaller buildings around it, and the way it's lit certain ways, it still reads like it could be a pretty cool monster to see, not necessarily in person, but perhaps televised after the fact. Nice detailing done also to the chest area. You still sort of get that texturing that NECA does when it comes to a lot of their Godzilla releases, where like the surface kind of looks like the trunk or the bark of a tree, as you can see really up close there. The legs, again, have a little bit more of a fullness to them. This specific Godzilla stands out for me as one that has notable folds. Like he looks like he skips leg day a whole lot of times. Again, there's not really a whole lot of paint to be had on this particular guy. There are a few little areas, yes. Dark airbrushing of gray, otherwise you would have basically just the straight out gray coloring. He's got the coloring, of course, also in his fingers, where he does have some much needed articulation. Standard, it seems, for most of the NECA releases, he has the articulation on the 3 fingers. So basically what it is just these 3 fingers move independently. They're all together forever, and the articulation point is just right in the middle there. But he does have some nice coloring added to his nails, sort of that kind of golden yellow color. That's the case also on both sides. And he also has that same sort of color scheme also into his toenails as well. Quite considerably large toenails too. Of course, then his noted trait, most Godzillas will always have the rack of plates, spikes that, of course, stick out from his spine. This Godzilla doesn't change that too much. It keeps it consistent with ones we've seen before, although the platelets are generally quite smaller on this one. You have one larger one on the kind of top area of his back, between his shoulders, and then he's got these smaller ones as they get closer and closer to his tail. This particular Godzilla also has, of course, the 3 rows, with a smaller row that happens just on the outside of it. They're so small, and yet NECA still managed to get those all painted in, all the way across to the end of the tail. There is some assembly that's, of course, required when you get this out of the packaging. More importantly, it's just the tail assembly. This piece from this point to, of course, this point, this is one separate piece. I did have to do, of course, the hot water trick of submerging this tail into hot water just to soften that socket joint. When I felt it was soft enough, then I just applied a little bit of pressure to that ball joint, and it went on very easy. Don't stress trying to fit this on without doing the hot water trick. I've done that. I stressed over it, and I've gotten like the little indentations in my hand to prove it. No, just go the safer route, the easier route. Take a little bit of water, hot water. Doesn't have to be boiling water. Submerge the tail a little bit in that, and then you'll see how easy that actually snaps in place. Overall, like again, the design of Godzilla here is maybe not everybody's cup of tea. Some people prefer their Godzilla to be a little bit more lizard-like, while there are some people that enjoy sort of the design and styling of this Godzilla, who again is a little bit lizard, a little bit bear, and a little bit of feline, all mixed together. So let's have a look at the figure's articulation, and there's a fair bit. It comes with the territory, of course, of looking at these Godzilla releases. The head is on a separate ball joint, so already it can rotate all the way around. You can hinge it up, you can hinge it down, and of course you can also rock it back and forth. They have left a fair bit of a gap from this head to the neck area. You can even see it right there. Sure, the gap does leave a little bit more of a noticeable area to the head, but to its credit, you can tilt the head in a way that some Godzilla figures don't allow you to do that. So that's a nice touch, the fact that they added just that little bit of gap space right there. Then additionally to that, of course, we've already looked at his mouth does open and close. Say ah. Like I said, that opens and closes. Then you have articulation, of course, in the neck. That rotates back and forth. Then you've got a secondary ball joint working at the torso area, lining up to where it ends around the area of the waist. Some nice dark shadowing that they've added in here, in this area as well. I mean, even like on the under area of his neck, something I didn't even mention too much of. There's a little bit of dark gray that they've added in there too. So again, while it's gray on gray, at least it's a shade darker, or in some cases a shade lighter, that it just breaks that up a little bit, allows those details to pop and stand out. Then, of course, for the arm articulation, the arms rotate all the way around. The arm articulation actually isn't here, even though it kind of looks like there's a line that would allow you to rotate the arm. In actual fact, the articulation point is from the elbow down, and there's a forearm articulation point right there. Then the hands rotate all the way around. We've already looked at the fact that the fingers all articulate, or at least these three fingers articulate. You just hinge them in and out like that. Then, of course, then you get to his rump. Godzilla's behind. It's substantially, I know, we're all looking at it right now. Sorry, Godzilla. The legs go forward and back, attaching to that via ball joint. You can hinge the legs out. That's about as much as you can actually get on these. You can go forward and back on the legs, and you can also bend at the knee. Now, the problem with it, there is so much massive plastic going on here. Of course, taking cues from the original movie design, he's a little fuller. Like I said, there's not much leg day happening for Godzilla, resulting in what comes to be, when you are rotating the legs, very little that you can actually do with them. Just a little bit. That's about as much as you can actually get going with them. Then, of course, the feet rotate all the way around. You can hinge them down, you can hinge them up, and you can rock them back and forth. Then let's, of course, start dissecting the tail, which is made up of sectional joints. Of course, you've got the ball joint happening here. Then you've got the secondary ball joint, not here, not here, not here. They sort of actually cheated in a way, making it look like this is all articulation point. In actual fact, the articulation is only here, but right in this section, this is all molded plastic. Even though there's like a dividing line right here, the articulation technically doesn't start till about this section right here. So you've got a ball joint at the front, then you've got a ball joint right here, then you've got one additionally here, and then, of course, then it gets to the tail that you've then added with additional socket sections. So you have one, you have two, and then on the very end, of course, you've got the wireframe tail, just starting right here. There's a little bit of a wire bend. What they actually have done differently on this particular Godzilla, normally like that end tail piece usually starts like around here, and then all the rest of the tail tends to be the wire frame. In this case, actually, they've sort of cheated in a way by cutting back some of the articulation points on the tail going up to the end of the tail. But in this case, they've actually added some additional articulation with a ball joint on the very end. Normally, it would be here all wireframe. In this case, for Godzilla versus Biollante, he actually has ball joints here and a ball joint here on the end of the tail. So you can kind of curl it up in a way that you wouldn't be able to do normally with regular Godzilla figures. I like this guy for all the, I feel, the wrong reasons, and perhaps with that is all the good reasons. He's a little chunky, he's a little hefty, he looks a little more stuffed, like a stuffed cute little animal. I also like the face on this one. It may turn some people away from wanting their Godzillas to be looking a little bit more lizard-like. I don't get as much that lizard design with him on this particular release of Godzilla. But through that, there's sort of a charm that goes along with him. He's cute, he's pudgy, he's full, he skips leg day altogether. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I like this Godzilla so much. Godzilla from the Godzilla vs. Biollante movie. Now, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, or someone a little bit bigger, Godzilla. Some of us like the fact that these characters stay the same in every film that they're in. With every sequel, you're going to have a character that looks exactly the same as he did from the film before that. And in all the cases I've just listed, these are all characters that look different in every single film. Each time a new art team designs what they would like to have their definitive looking Jason, their definitive looking Michael Myers, their definitive, in this case, looking Godzilla. And that's the appeal that goes along with these films. In every single Godzilla film, he's battling a different monster, and he looks a little bit different as well. So that you can then say, I like the design of Godzilla from, say, Godzilla from Tokyo SOS. Don't really like the design of him in Godzilla vs. Biollante. And that's sort of the charm that goes along with watching these films. Seeing what the art team has decided for themselves as what they consider to be the look of Godzilla in that particular film. Certainly as a side note, though, just mentioning again, Biollante is by far one of my favorites of the kaiju monsters that Godzilla has fought in the film franchise. It has two different looks. Of course, it's taking the DNA of a human, it's taking the DNA of a rose, of all things, and it's taking the DNA of Godzilla and sort of mixing that all together to produce a creature known as Biollante, which actually takes two forms in the film. Starting first with sort of the package artwork that you're seeing on the front of the box here. It has a rose head with sort of teeth in the middle. And then later, as Godzilla fights it again, it has more something resembling Godzilla with multiple tentacles. Would love to see, if the possibility, of course, of NECA being still able to do Godzilla figures, I would love to see what they could do with a Biollante. Of course, it would be a lot larger than the Godzilla figures that we're normally used to seeing. But the idea of getting a Biollante in a fully articulated figure is always something I really ever wanted. I'm sure there's companies that have produced it, but I certainly would love to see what NECA could do with a character, a creature, as big as and impressive as Biollante. Have you seen the film, actually, of Godzilla vs. Biollante? Let me know down below in the comment section. Or based on this review, what do you guys think of the figure? A big thank you, by the way, to the folks over at NECA Toys who provided the sample of Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Biollante. Also, if you guys want to go back and have a look at all my reviews of Godzilla, the King of the Monsters himself, feel free to check out my playlist called Godzilla. Also, if you'd like to subscribe to this channel, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on so you get those friendly reminders. And again, as a friendly reminder, just keep in mind, Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when you'll find new videos popping up on this channel. And just an FYI, just between you and me and the other 3 people watching this, there are going to be a couple more Godzilla reviews lined up and coming your way. So if you do like the King of the Monsters, stay tuned to this channel because there's going to be a lot more coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.